Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whatever time zone you're listening. This is Spirit Matters. My name is Dayal, and I'm here with Kishor, Chandra, and Acyuta Gopi. It's Monday. We're out back from the weekend. Glad that you guys are all here with us. This is our daily Bhakti Center podcast where we get on and we discuss spiritual life as it relates to our daily lives and how things intersect because you have all these principles and teachings and philosophies of spiritual life, and they can get really heady and sort of analytical. And when we look at it, we think, we just got back from India, Kishore, Chandra, and I, and the question everybody has is, can I do this? And I don't want to do anything wrong. And can I wear this? And can I do this? And can I touch that? It's like, don't look at that. Don't touch that. No, you're standing on the wrong side of the temple. You're wearing the wrong skirt. And all of these things. We think that we get it wrong, and then what happens is we sort of we replace the ritual with the substance, the process. And I think that if I'm doing X, Y, and Z, that I'm doing good in my spiritual life. And the reality is that we're human, and these teachings intersect with our lives in very unique and dynamic ways. And if we're not talking about that, it's easy for it to just get all stuck in the head. And we want things to drop down into the heart and be able to discuss and digest and assess where these teachings intersect with us on a human level. And we only do that with honest and vulnerable conversations. So I've invited Kishore and Acyuta to discuss their biggest mistakes and struggles in spiritual life, and how they where are you guys falling behind? Where are you falling short? Let's start there. Anyone? Anyone?
My time management is always an issue. Forever an issue.
Yeah. That's not where we're going to start, but that's, people are waiting. People want to hear.
I was about to say, happy Monday. Let's start with our shortcomings.
Let's start with our shortcomings. Happy Valentine's Day. It's
Happy
Valentine's
Valentine's Day.
I love you guys.
Love you.
Love you guys.
What was the end of, was it Friday? Was that spiritual neuropathy? Neuropathy? Am I getting it right? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you stop feeling in spiritual life? You want to pick us up where we left off, Acyuta, or any of you guys? Where did we leave off?
With Kishor's Bell's palsy.
Kishor's Bell's palsy. He had Bell's palsy when he was younger. Well, I had a verse that I looked up, a famous verse that we've referenced before from Queen Kunti, but I was thinking of that I wanted to mention because we were talking about, I think we were talking about freedom. And we were talking about, I gave the example of freedom is determining where we want the direction of our life to flow. And I think also what we discussed, whether it was on Friday or a couple times last week, was the idea of faith, and that every decision we make is a building of faith in a particular direction. So every choice that we make, every action we perform, we're building faith in something, or we're removing faith in something. And interesting also, today's Valentine's Day, and the idea of relationship. The idea of relationship, we don't use the word faith, but we use the word trust. We do use the word faith, like faithful. Are you faithful? We use the word trust, or building trust in a relationship. And trust is something that takes time. And so you build that trust over time with actions, and you make choices. Every choice you make, you're building trust, or you're degrading trust in some way, shape, or form. And so this verse from the Bhagavatam of Queen Kunti, the very famous verse 1:842, where she says, as the Ganges river flows, we were just in the river Ganges, flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. So Queen Kunti, like a river flowing towards her supreme divine, the master of her heart. And Srila Prabhupada says so beautifully in the purport that I wanted to read, because I remember on Friday I was reading this purport and I was like, this is exactly what we're talking about, even though I can't exactly remember everything we were talking about. But Prabhupada says, perfection of pure devotional service is attained when all attention is diverted towards the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So I kind of felt like that was it. It's like, wow, when I can actually build a canal that allows the river of my attention to flow towards loving service. And when you think about the age of distraction that we live in, And we think freedom is doing whatever I want, but doing whatever I want is actually like pouring a glass of water on just to empty countertop, and it just spills everywhere, and it's directionless and amorphous. Like, that's not freedom to just dump the glass over. The freedom is to intentionally build a canal where I can pour that water in, and it starts to flow. So when I'm chanting japa or when I'm doing my spiritual practice, it's not just about, does this feel good in the moment, or do I like what I'm doing? It's that this is a choice that is actually building faith and trust and a flow towards where I want my consciousness to ultimately be. And that affected me this week in terms of, when I think about my spiritual practice, it's not just like, oh, do I feel like it or not? It's like, this choice has lasting impact beyond just the moment. And so that's where I left off, and that's what I was thinking about this morning, and that's why I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we might have spoken about this before, but Bhakti Tirtha Swami has written that like a real loving relationship has both accountability and responsibility.
Hmm.
And it's so different from what we could hear today, which is, if you're in a relationship, like on the surface, everybody's just like, look, you gotta let the other person be responsible for their stuff, and they've got to be accountable for their, which is true. But also, when you enter into a relationship, we should be really, really conscious that we are actually responsible for lasting impacts, both on ourselves and others. And there is a lot of accountability to be held there. And if we really want to delve deeply and have an actual relationship, then we should be eager to have some responsibility and accountability. It means we're taking it seriously. It means that, like you said, it's not just surface, it's entered deeply into the heart. And I feel like our spiritual practice is a relationship, one that we often take very much for granted, and one that we sort of assume baseline is going to be one-sided, usually on our side. Like you said, Doyle, we're constantly wondering, even if I don't do this, does Krishna even care? Does Krishna care about this relationship? Is he invested in this relationship? Meanwhile, Krishna's more invested than we could ever begin to fathom. And we're
Hmm.
the ones with this in and out energy, which is sometimes there, mostly not. And sometimes there to take accountability, mostly not.
Hmm.
So I think that because we tend to look at things from our perspective, starting there, right? Starting from our our kind of energy. I heard this a long time ago, and my brother would say it often. The things that we look out for or even despise the most in other people, we can recognize those symptoms. We can find those symptoms because we have them,
Hmm.
which kind of sucks. Like there's sometimes when I'm really looking at people, I'm like, oh, really annoys me about that person. Like, look how they, and I'm like,
Uh-oh.
is that
Uh-oh.
somewhere? It's like, I might have to fix that. But like we are looking at a relationship with Krishna based on how we'd act. And
Hmm.
so if we think about it that way, it's like, okay, but do I really care? Am I actually invested? Am I going to be there for the long run? Because if I know that I'm a
Hmm.
faithful person, a trustworthy person, a loyal person, a really steady person, then usually I'd start thinking that Krishna is that way also. But all
Hmm.
of those things that I fear are lacking in Krishna are really things that are just lacking in me, and I'm just projecting them onto my supreme best friend, thinking, oh, but what if they're exactly like me?
Hmm. Wow. I was reflecting. I've been reading these statements have been popping up for me. Like, the best way to feel loved is to be loving.
Hmm.
um, and I wanted to read the rest of just a little bit more of this purport that I was reading from the Bhagavatam, because I realized that actually how much this purport related to what you were sharing, also about like feeling.
Hmm.
Um, Srila Prabhupada writes, to cut off the tie of all other affections does not mean complete negation of the finer elements like affection for someone else. This is not possible. A living being, whoever they may be, must have this feeling of affection for others because this is a symptom of life. The symptoms of life, such as desire, anger, hankerings, feelings of attraction, etc., cannot be annihilated. Only the objective has to be changed. Desire cannot be negated, but in devotional service, the desire is changed only for the service of the Lord in place of desire for sense gratification. And in the Nectar of Devotion, when Srila Prabhupada talks about the definition of bhakti being devotion directed towards Krishna, Prabhupada elaborates on the definition of Krishna being that there's nothing separate from Krishna. And so when we love Krishna, it means Krishna and all of his expansions and all of those living beings connected to Krishna. And so meaning each and every one of us as well, not that we are Krishna, but that we are connected to Krishna in some way, and we are his parts and parcels. And therefore, this idea of engaging in very personal relationships, allowing emotions to exist and to have affection, but to change the nature of it in context and relation to a supreme higher power, is the perfection of those feelings and relationships. And when we have sort of become out of shape spiritually, out of shape emotionally, and unable to express those things in a elevated way, then we assume that Krishna himself must not have the ability to express them, and then we sort of like lose faith or we shy away. But what I'm hearing from you and what I'm hearing from Srila Prabhupada in this purport is that we all need to up our game. We need to rather than looking around and blaming Krishna or our devotees or other people for not being loving or not being whatever it may be that we think we're not getting. But if we can up our game in terms of how we offer those things ourselves, we'll find ourselves becoming much bigger receptacles for them and increasing our scope and ability to receive them in a powerful way. And rather than squeezing them out of others, you're not giving me the love that I need, you're not giving me the acceptance that I need, you're not giving me the X, Y, and Z, recognizing when I give those things, I naturally I unclench myself. Because those things naturally flow from Krishna infinitely, and we are part of Krishna, so they flow from us internally. But we're so clenched up thinking that I got to squeeze it somewhere else that I'm just getting hard and bitter and resentful. And it's this counterintuitive of like, letting my shoulders down and then realizing that like it's flowing from within. And the more I give it, the more Krishna will flow it. Kishor, you're humming
yeah,
and a humming.
I'm humming. I have a lot to say. I think I had another interesting acupuncture story.
Here we go, acupuncture. It all comes back to acupuncture.
I went to acupuncture on Saturday to help with the jet lag and just like arriving. And I had like a very like sensitive moment after acupuncture, just like feeling very emotional and stuff. And my acupuncturist, I've been going to him for years, so like we know each other, and we're really good friends. And so we had a conversation about it. And basically his homework for me, he was just like, I want you to explore like passive things, like passive activities. And I was like, what do you mean passive activities? He was just like, he was like trying to explain it and he didn't have necessarily the language for it at the time. Like it was an exploration. And he was like, well, what do you think in your mind, what comes up that could be passive or yin or something softer? And immediately I was like, well, can chanting be passive? I have a meditation practice, I chant in the morning. And he was like, yeah, it could be, but it really depends. It's not necessarily about the thing. Because I was like, can music be chanting? Can kirtan be chanting? Passive? And he was like, yeah, it could be. He's like, but it really depends more on how you're approaching it. He's like, if you're approaching your meditation practice or your kirtan practice or whatever it is with this mindset of like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this chanting and it's gonna be great and I'm gonna chant XYZ amount of rounds and then I'm gonna be perfect and I'm gonna reach prema and it's okay, Krishna, he's like, then that's not passive. He's like, then you're just kind of like going into the mind space, you're planning, you're trying to be in control of things. That's not it. he was like, you just need to like be with your feelings. And like, I really hate that advice, actually. I remember I remember one therapist I had a long time ago, he was like, you just need to sit with your feelings. And I was like, no. I was like, I don't want to sit with my feelings. I just want to do. I just want to like do and act and make it all right, you know?
I'm finding a new acupuncturist.
Yeah, I actually told him yesterday, not that he's fired, but I told him I was just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to like sit with my feelings. And he was like, you have to. I was like, okay. And I think what's really important for me and the lesson that I learned from that, and it's something that I've learned in my life and is something that I think, especially in this contemporary society of just like it's very product based and performance based and doing and image based and showing and like I've reached this, you know, what's it called, height of my spiritual practices or of my bodily practices or like whatever it might be. When we began the podcast today, DG, you were talking about, you know, ritual and missing out on the substance and focusing more on the form, which is a common theme that we've spoken about on the podcast before. But the verse that came to my mind, it was like immediately it like struck into my mind when you were speaking about this, and I was reading it a little bit. It's this tadashmasaram hridayam batidam, and I won't say the rest of the verse, but it's basically it says, the translation says, certainly that heart is steel framed, stone clad, which in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes and the hairs stand on end. And I remember the first time I heard this verse, I was really like, I felt called out. I was just like, wait a minute. My hairs are not standing on end, and I'm not experiencing ecstasy when I'm chanting these. Like, am I doing something wrong?
Is he talking about me?
Is this directly?
Is this about me?
And it's so interesting because I feel like, you know, this topic that we're talking about, it's like, okay, I don't believe that Krishna is there for me or that Krishna is going to catch me when I fall or whatever. And therefore that gives me the quote unquote license to approach the practice in kind of a, you know, mediocre kind of way. And I think that that's really the thing, at least for me. Like my takeaway is like, how can I be better at catching myself when I notice that I'm checking out of my practice instead of checking into my practice? Like, because I, for one, will, you know, just be like, boom, finish my rounds, you know, like did it, check off the list, like, etc. Not all the time, but, you know, some of the time. And it's something that I'm realizing, like, how can I really enter into the practice more sincerely, more genuinely, more as a conversation as opposed to something to check off of my list, more as something that I actually believe in, that is actually going to like cause transformation, elicit transformation in me, as opposed to like, okay, I signed up for this, I made the vows, I did the thing, here I am, I'm practicing bhakti yogi, Hare Krishna, you know? And I think I'm going to read this purport a little bit, and then I'll stop, because I read the purport and it's very, very fascinating. And it goes a lot in line with the purport that you just read, DG, about our senses. And so Srila Prabhupada writes, the whole process of spiritual culture is aimed at changing the heart of the living being in the matter of his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord as subordinate servant, which is his eternal constitutional position. So, with the progress of devotional service, the reaction of change in the heart is exhibited by gradual detachment from the sense of material enjoyment by a false sense of lording it over the world, and an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. Vaidhi Bhakti, or regulated devotional service by the limbs of the body, namely the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands, and the legs, as already explained herein before, is now stressed herein in relation to the mind, which is the impetus for all activities of the limbs of the body. It is expected by all means that by discharging regulated devotional service, one must manifest the change of the heart. If there is no such change, the heart must be considered steel-framed, for it is not melted even when there is chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We must always remember that hearing and chanting are the basic principles of discharging devotional duties, and if they are properly performed, there will follow the reactional ecstasy with signs of tears in the eyes and standing of the hairs on the body. These are natural consequences and are the preliminary symptoms of the bhava stage, which occurs before one reaches the perfectional stage of prema, love of Godhead. And even though obviously the standard is very high, you know, it's like the preliminary stages of bhava and prema like this, but I think the biggest takeaway for me from that is like, if I'm not feeling anything in my practice, then I need to change something immediately. Like I immediately need to like note that down, make it an important part of like my day. Like, oh, I didn't feel anything. Like this just became a rote practice for me. So let me write about this. Let me meditate on this. Let me figure something out. Let me go to the shastra. Let me talk to my sangha. Let me talk to my spiritual brothers and sisters about this, because something is up. I feel like so many of us go through just letting that moment turn into 2 moments and days and weeks and months and years of just like, yeah, I'm just going along the motions. And I feel like that's very insidious and very pernicious. But I'm excited. I hear Acyuta kind of just like, or I see Acyuta just like nodding. So I kind of want to, I want to hear.
She's just like, let me speak. I've got something to say.
It's exactly what you said. So, you know, first thing is we are looking for these rules to suddenly fix everything that we think is wrong. Even Queen Kunti, right? So in those prayers, Queen Kunti is like, you know what? I've spent such a long time, I feel like, concentrating on the wrong thing. And so she's like, so Krishna, eradicate all these attachments. And what I really love is at that point, Srila Prabhupada says, is Krishna going to eradicate all of her attachments, even to her family and all of the Pandavas and everything? No. Why? Because they're devotees. And so this idea of our spiritual lives is not the antithesis of having loving, connecting relationships with people, family, friends, lovers, all these. Like, it's not your spiritual life is not meant to be at odds with a relationship life. It's not meant to do that. Like, it's supposed to go parallel. So I feel like, you know, when we get into these situations where we're not feeling or any of these things, then we're chanting, and then we're taking all of those feelings that we think we're not having, but we are having feelings, they're just the negative ones, and we're dumping them all into our spiritual lives and then going, why isn't it fixing everything? Why isn't it working? Well, because it's like, well, this process is supposed to be blissfully, joyfully performed. Are you joyful? Of course not. I'm miserable, but I'm still chanting. Because isn't that the goal? Like, you're miserable. I'm going to be chanting anyway. Psh, don't be stupid. Like, you know, at first we have to like really come to grips with the fact that, okay, we're miserable. Why are we miserable? Let's like actually ask
Misery.
these questions.
Misery in a beat
Yeah,
bag.
right? Like let's talk about like you said, Kishor, you know, figure it out. But one thing that I really love is when I come to the realization that Srila Prabhupada has been giving all of these tips for forever. And then we read it outside and we're like, oh my gosh, you know what? I think that this person just said it so like went to a Tony Robbins convention and then it was amazing. And I'm like, you know, Srila Prabhupada just said that same thing. Like it wasn't as like free flowing, you know. Srila Prabhupada sometimes he's like really like, guys, stop. Let's so, you know, we were thinking about it. It's like the if you want to feel more loving, then give love. And I'm like, yeah, I hated that advice because I couldn't, it felt empty. But then when Srila Prabhupada is like, well, the opposite of what you're feeling, like you're doing this thing and you want to feel more love, you want to be in control, right? The way to fix that is service.
Mm.
The way to fix that whole thing is service, which is the same thing that they're saying. Give love, serve. So when I'm seeing these things and when I'm seeing these things that I want, and I used to be miserable on Valentine's Day because I was one of those like on the inside super romantic mushy person. And if that wasn't there, I'm like, oh, all of these people are around here reminding me of all the things that I'm lacking right now. Until I started saying, like, wait a second, how can I be more of the thing that I want on Valentine's Day? Where, like, okay, fine, then nobody else has to celebrate it alone. And then who are we celebrating it with? Well, we have a supreme person that's always ready, always down for the most romantic adventure anybody could ever have. But that's actually just service. It's just flipping a mindset of, okay, I don't have this and I think I want this, but how can I get this? The way to fix it is to serve. You know, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even if you commit some Vaishnava aparad or an offense against a Vaishnava, the way to fix it is then to serve, to then go and express gratitude, express the wonderful things about, praise those same people that you were thinking about offending before. All the things that get on your nerves, like flip it and give yourself a way to serve. I also think that your acupuncturist is so funny and on point, and I like, but that's the hardest thing for action oriented people to get. It's like, now just sit for a second and be, and you're like, what? But do you know how deep that chasm is? If I just sit with it, it's a very deep dark road, but it doesn't have to be. And you never have to journey through that alone. Like, whenever I'm in that point where I'm like, I don't just want to sit, and I'm like, but I'm not alone. I'm not just sitting alone with my thoughts. There's a supreme person right here saying, you keep forgetting about me. You keep forgetting about me. And there are those times that I'm like, okay, if I just allowed myself to sit and be with Krishna and tell Krishna all the things, even the things that I feel are unsightly or not so gracious or graceful about even myself, what kind of surrender would that bring in?
Yeah.
Then it becomes intriguing. Like, oh, wait, now, you know, instead of me disliking myself for all of these things, what kind of surrender would that bring? Like, that's some Srimad Bhagavatam level of surrender and conversation that comes out. Kunti, unless she spent time sitting with all of these feelings, would not have these prayers. All of these people that have all of these prayers in Bhagavatam have sat with some heavy, deep, incredibly uncomfortable emotions. And they've had no choice but to sit with them and go through them and realize that Krishna was with them all the time.
If you think of what I was coming to my mind as you were speaking, Acyuta, and also Kishor, we should invite your acupuncturist onto the show. Is that if I think of love, like these things that I'm trying to experience, affection, belonging, acceptance, etc., as almost like this energy, this flow, this current that I'm trying to step into, and I'm waiting to be like invited into it, but I actually own an access point through my own participating in it. Like, I'm waiting for somebody. There's two parts of it. There's the giving and receiving, and we're all looking to give and receive love. We don't just want to receive love. We also want to give love. We want both that reciprocation. And it's almost like stepping into the sunshine, you know, stepping into the sunshine, waiting for the sun to kind of come through my window, whatever it is. But I can also step into the sun and experience that. And so I can step into that party of love by giving it. And if I find myself getting and then experiencing bitterness, then, because that's the whole thing, it's not material. It's something on a much subtler level. And so if I'm finding myself bitter, then that means that, okay, maybe transactionally I did something, but I was actually, it was still this material consciousness engagement. And I need to retrace my steps and not just look about what I did, but the consciousness with which I did it. Because if I'm ending up bitter and resentful and etc., then there's somewhere that I need to go back and retrace my steps. There's a part of myself that I abandoned somewhere along the way. There's a part of myself that was setting myself up in some way for some sort of sense of emptiness, and there's somewhere I need to go back and retrace my steps and question, how I went about things, because it doesn't just because I can see sometimes it can just set us up for more misery. It's like, just give more of yourself. You know, and it's like, well, then you're going to end up even more empty and more resentful and more alone. I just got to give more of myself. But it's actually like I'm not just trying to give more of myself. I'm trying to somehow slide into the current that's already existing. It's an eternal current of love and energy that I'm trying to expose myself to. And I do that by changing my frequency to operate on that level. I'm turning the dial of my consciousness to a certain frequency so that I can receive that current of love that's flowing eternally and always around me. I just have to change the frequency of my consciousness. And I do that by giving love, by giving forgiveness, by giving affection, by giving acceptance.
Mm.
And now it's not like, okay, now I gave it. Once it comes back, I'm golden. It's like, no, you gave it and you're in. Now you're in the current. Now you're in the current and you're experiencing that. And so it's like changing that frequency of our consciousness, I think is the key.
And I know we're running out of time, but I just want to say one thing because it was so good, DG. It was so good. What you just said was so good.
So good.
It's so good. And I think what really came up for me
I'm
when you were
expecting a lot of
speaking-
love from you guys in return for that. Please.
What came up for me when you were speaking was this idea of of performance as opposed to genuine feeling. And a really good marker of knowing when you're performing a feeling is if you feel bitter if you didn't receive it in return afterwards. Because I think when you feel negative emotions after you gave something, it's a really good marker of like, well, did I actually mean it? You know, was that unconditional, or was I doing it as a transactional thing? And for me, I get really tripped up in that a little bit just because I'm secretly an introvert. People don't know this about me because I seem very like, but secretly I like to be alone and I recharge being alone. And I find myself sometimes just like going through the motions, just like, yes, how are you? I'm fine, great. How are you? You know, and it's like, is this actual genuine feeling? Am I turning the dial? Am I actually doing it? Or do I think that I'm doing it? And that's been such a huge growth point for me. It's like, how do I get out of my mind? Because if my mind is controlling the emotional performance, then it's not, I don't know if I want to use the word real, but it's not complete, you know? And how can and that's why going back to my acupuncture, it's like, how can I just like be with this emotion? How can I actually, I love that image that Dayal said, like, how can I actually turn the dial to change the frequency away from my mind and into my heart so that it's a real, genuine emotion and not like a performance of that emotion?
Yeah. And that's the spirit. That's from Davin. We just got back from Davin. It's a consciousness. It's a frequency. And that's why the gatekeeper is keeping us out, because if we can't bring the wrong frequency into Vrindavan. Okay, Kim.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were talking about before. It's like, no gas station proposals. It's like we've got all the boxes checked, and then we do the things, right? We do the things that you can think through, but it's like, did you feel any of it? There's so many things we say, that we say prayers to Vaishnavas all the time. It's like, did we really think about what we just said, or did we just rattle it off? It's memorized by rote. It's just boop, and actually, I don't know. Can I read a poem that I wrote?
Oh my God, please.
No.
Please send us home.
Yeah, send us home.
This idea of the steel framed heart. So there's a poem. What do you do when there's metal around your heart? When you feel as though your soul is in a coma, unresponsive, barely breathing, your heart feels tucked away beneath countless layers of heaped up failure and set in the middle of a sea of pain. And somehow all you need is a pulse, one small breath, one tiny change on the monitor of life to let you know that you haven't completely flatlined, to let you know that it's okay to keep going. So what do? Where do you turn? Paper covers rock, rock covers scissors. But what conquers an armor made of metallized fear, reinforced with disillusioned disappointment, until there are no chinks, no seams, no weaknesses? I realize that I might be no match for myself, for the unrelenting beast that is the cynicism of my own past mistakes. I'd think the war was completely over, but I was never fighting it alone. I am no match for the beast. But what I try to remember is that the beast is no match for you. Will you fight for me, my lord? My armor is impenetrable. I'm fallen and unconscious. Only the weapon of your infallible, unconquerable love is enough to save me. So use your greatest weapon on me.
Hmm.
Yeah, just that idea that, this steel frame, this stone heart didn't come about for no reason.
Hmm.
There were disappointments, there were heartbreaks and heartaches and bumps along the way that we got, and rightfully so, we got really afraid. This whole sojourn of lifetimes has kind of like messed us up. We've all got some deep-seated trauma, but I feel like Krishna is still like, it's okay. It's okay. There's a place where that trauma can go away. We can kind of relinquish it and let go.
Yeah. Where I want to pick up what I was coming to my mind, and we're over, but was just the honoring of our journey. That's what came to my mind, is looking back and like we just gloss over all of the bumps and the wounds and the things that add up over time, and I feel heartbroken. I feel heart sore, and I don't know why. It's because I've neglected all of the bruises that I've accumulated along the way. So tomorrow I'd love to talk about, or maybe we can pick up about that honoring of our journey. At least that's what came to my mind today. Kimberly, what do you got for us in terms of our takeaways?
Thank you for sharing the poem, Acyuta. That's beautiful. Our choices have a lasting impact beyond just the moment. A real loving relationship has accountability and responsibility. Our divine higher power is more invested than we can begin to fathom. The antidote to our troubles is to give love and service, and we can change our frequency flow to wade into the current of love.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you for reading that poem, Acyuta. It was really, really powerful, and we'll stick with you. You should share that poem on the Rise platforms that people can see it and read it and take it with them. Please do that. Yeah, share that poem because I'd like to read it again also. It's very much stuck with me. Thank you so much. Thank you guys all so much. Appreciate you all for being here. Really, really grateful to you guys. We will see you again very, very soon. Be in touch. Bye-bye.